Welcome to the Finance and General Purposes Committee meeting, Monday 24th of July. Usual thing, this meeting is being recorded for publication on the Thatcham Town Council YouTube channel. Madam Clerk, any apologies for absence?
Apologies received from councillors Jeremy Cottam and Owen Jeffrey, and councillor Petra Pemberton appointed as substitute for councillor Cottam, and councillor Stephanie Stevenson appointed substitute for councillor Jeffrey.
Excellent. Thank you to the substitutes, much appreciated. Any declarations of interest from members on any items on the agenda? No, thank you. We'll move on to minutes of the last meeting held on 24th of April 2023. I would propose those from the chair, if that finds a seconder. Any queries on the minutes? I'm seeing none. Okay. Could I have a vote of those in favour of adoption, please? Thank you. Abstention from someone who wasn't here, which is perfectly acceptable. Any minutes arising, Madam Clerk, from previous meeting not covered on the agenda?
Nothing from me, Chairman.
Thank you. Move on to item number 5, proposed IT upgrade and reasons therefore. I'd like to welcome Michael from ION to the meeting. This came up at a previous F&GP meeting, I think prior to the election. So will come as a new subject to some of you. And there were various questions of a technical nature which were then asked at that meeting that we didn't feel capable of answering. So Michael has very kindly come along to answer the technical questions that we may have. Bearing in mind though that this is an item which is unknown to many, can I ask the town clerk please to give a précis of the report in front of you and really the reasons why we are looking to do what we are looking to do.
Thank you, Chairman. Our server that we have here based at the office has exceeded 10 years use, and Microsoft have advised that it will not be supported any longer after the 12th of October 2023, which is fine until an issue arises, and then we could be in trouble because a lot of our data is made on that server. So I had a meeting with ION. ION have provided us with IT support for many, many years, and we're very, very happy with the service and advice that they give us. So I had a meeting with them to discuss options going forward. The licenses that we have here are Office 365, and as part of that function, there is cloud-based storage, which is a lot of computers are going these days for rather than servers. So I've done a summary of the 3 options. Yeah. So first, the short term, this would be to replace the server, which all options require an equipment refresh. So to carry on as we are at the moment, your cost there is just over £9,000 capital expenditure and revenue of 3,634. That's purely to replace the server and carry on as we currently operate. To upgrade some of our PCs to laptops, which would support working from home in cases of emergency or other reasons, there would be an additional cost of just over £5,000 for that. But again, in terms of where we're at, that would still be standing still pretty much in the position that we are in now. Or the third option is to future-proof, which would not require a replacement server. All our data would be stored in the cloud. We would require the equipment refresh, and we would require some upgrades to our desktop computers and file migration. But you can see from the totals, future proofing is it's not a great deal of capital investment more than the short-term option. And it gives us that future proofing. So it seems to be that would be the recommended way to go. When this was discussed before, there were some technical questions that we weren't able to answer. So we have Ion here this evening to answer any questions that might arise.
I'll throw it open to the floor for any comments, questions to either the clerk or to Michael. Councillor Croftingham.
Thank you, Chair. How resilient, robust is our internet connection? Because obviously working in the cloud, you have to be able to pull down the data or upload the data. What is the service level which we're getting for, and what's the speed we're getting for it?
Don't have that information with me to hand. I can get it for you, and if you want to, I'll provide my contact information. So if you want to,
Do we know who the provider is for our band here?
most of the links that we put in are through KCOM or Eclipse, or now a company called NASDAQ. They changed, rebranded again. So it's almost certainly going to be one of those two. I don't know which one off the top of my head because I wasn't involved in that particular project. But I can get you that information certainly.
But it's just people in this building that have access. So it's not other buildings which.
Just
this building here. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dunn?
With the standstill proposal, you mentioned laptops which would facilitate working from home, which obviously is a way of future proofing as well. Who knows what could happen? That doesn't seem to be covered in the future proofing costing. So it says 5 times PC memory upgrades, but no mention of laptops or and the ability then to work from home.
So it would be a mixture of laptops and PCs. Some of our PCs are due for upgrade anyway. So this would be to some of the desktops that we have here at the moment aren't capable of the cloud, what we would need to upgrade to. So that's the PC memory upgrades, right, to bring them in line. It wouldn't be everybody having a laptop. It would be the desktops that are due to be replaced. Would be, instead of replacing a desktop for a desktop, we begin a cycle of replacing a desktop with a laptop, so that over the course of time everybody would have a laptop, but not immediately, because they
so immediately how many would be?
So it would be all but 5, because 5 would remain on desktop. So I think it's 8 laptops.
So just to clarify, sorry, the 5120 would be 8 laptops or 8 laptops plus, sorry, include 5120 would give us 8 laptops and 5 desktop memory upgrades.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you for that. Chancellor Stevenson.
I've got 2 very basic, naive questions. As soon as you mention the cloud, I'm worried about security, because we've been self-contained with all the information here in this server. So do we need a better grade of protection to secure this information?
What it comes down to for most companies is when you were preparing for GDPR, you will have classified all of your documents. Whether or not some of those documents were classified that in a way that would prevent the use of cloud storage for them. Which I think one of my colleagues will have gone through with you and determined that you were fine with cloud storage in the UK for all of your documents. There are concerns with, therefore, various institutions of storing documents in the cloud in other countries, as long as the portal in which your documents will be kept is in the UK. I believe your own GDPR classification was.
And so you're counting that as being our data is secure.
In this particular case, yes, the Microsoft is about as secure as you can be.
Okay. My second question is, how far are we prepared to risk everything to the cloud? You know, if you don't have backups down here, if you don't have hard copies, you could lose the lot if something happened. Some phenomenal sunspots, or, you know, in Russian interference with satellites. It's not completely unfeasible if you don't have any backups.
There is a backup solution in there, which is a separate company run by a separate company called Datto that we've used for many, many years. We used to use tape drives back decades ago. Now they run a 365 backup service called Backup. It's a silly name, but the product basically backs up everything that you have in the cloud with their unlimited version retention. So every copy of every document will be backed up at least once a day.
Thank you.
In the UK,
To a completely different provider
within the UK.
within the UK.
Cool. And did you want to
No, I was just,
Okay,
I was
make a point?
with my West Berkshire hat on of being finance and IT services. I'm just wondering, again, just as a benchmark, is it worth just getting the IT function in West Berkshire, just have a quick look over this? They also do provide data center as well, which I found out last week. So just as a comparison cost.
Comparing apples with apples, then yes.
Yeah.
Is it apples with apples if they're running a data center though?
They're running a data center. They're putting stuff into the cloud as well. So I'm fully confident the cloud is secure. It does have backups. Just about every organization now puts stuff in the cloud, but as you said earlier, what is key is making sure that those cloud-based IT server farms are actually located in the UK.
Okay, Tom?
Yeah, the weakest point of our communications is normally us as the users and allowing people to hack into us into somewhere else. From a very man on the street level, how secure is our secure stuff? Because we do, but not like a large local authority, but still needed to be kept
Any
secure.
access is secured by multi-factor authentication as standard. Microsoft are actually in the process of stopping using SMS messages or that sort of authentication. So everybody will eventually end up using an application of some sort, probably on their mobiles or another device, to provide a authentication code when they sign in. In addition to this, all the laptops would be encrypted so that anybody who does get hold of them will not be able to retrieve any data that might be held there.
Perfect, thank you.
And just going on to your own point, I think very, very early in the process, we actually quoted using the data of our building, which is run by the Bunker Secure Hosting, which has all of the certifications for the security for every nationality, in fact. And it was decided that it wasn't really cost effective to use a data center based service just because of the increased monthlies you get from using that sort of storage. Whereas the 365 platform, you're already paying for.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you. Any more questions? I think this is going to be a decision subject to, and I would suggest a decision subject to satisfaction with two questions. One is the extent of our internet connection, as Ian raises, and the other one, whether we wish to get a cross comparison with West Berks. My only nervousness about that is, are we actually comparing exactly what we will get? Because I don't know what West Berks would provide, and would we then be in a position where West Berks were doing something and another company were doing something else for us?
Potentially.
So I have a slight nervousness with that, just in terms of no one person knowing everything that there is. Stephanie?
Sorry, before you make the proposal with those limitations, I don't know what an acceptable speed is or a future-proof speed. And once we're provided with the information, is there a way to improve it if it needs improvement?
Depending on the link type of it, for instance, if you have a leased line solution, then usually you have your speed and a bearer that speed is running on. So people would have, say, a 200 meg service on a 1 gigabit bearer. Within that, you can then increase to the full size of the bearer. If you want to go past the speed of the bearer, then you need to replace the link.
Okay. So there's room for maneuver.
There's usually room for improvement.
Thank you.
Just a very quick
Okay.
question. On the back of that, with regards to the laptops, are they future-proof? In as much as I know that the laptop that I currently use in my job requires upgrading to be able to use Power BI. I don't know what that is. But so will it only give you what you need now, or will there be the potential for it to proceed into the future?
The machine's quoted, sorry, my colleague gave me the specifications, so I'm not actually working on the project, but I'm the technical director, so yeah, sadly, it forces me to come to meetings like this. Is a 12th gen Intel i5 processor, which is a reasonable spec. It will certainly run all Power BI applications, most of the Adobe suite. The only difference really between the standard specification is that we've specified double the memory in the future-proof ones. So rather than going for high-end machines, we've gone for machines of the type that you need that will do the job for easily the next 3 to 5 years.
I think within future budgets, we would also now be building in replacement program, be that putting a sinking fund to do a one-off replacement or replacement program over a period of time. Ian?
You're quite right to ask the question, is it future-proof? Because going forward, how we do things today will be totally different in 5 to 10 years' time. So the use of video technology is good as illustration. So when you have employees out in the field, potentially they're going to be talking back or broadcasting information back to HQ, and you'll be able to see on the screen exactly what they're referring to. So to have that video technology is going to be really, really key. So especially when we have this concept of a connected Berkshire, with the dig of having potentially of us being a smart district, West Berkshire, using that technology to make the residents' lives a lot easier. So yes, question is, especially from a graphics perspective, will we have enough processing power to be able to deal with video and other types of applications?
That sort of application is very, very memory intensive. The only question I would have as far as the specification in that particular light would be how much they need to store documents locally. Video files can take up a lot of space. And those machines, as specified, all only have 256 gigs of storage space. So with that in mind, maybe a quote for 512 gig machines instead could be a minor cost uplift.
Okay.
So apologies if I understand you correctly, to cover the point that Ian made, there might be a minor cost uplift on the figures in.
For local storage, for their basically local recording of video files before they're uploaded to the cloud.
I always have to ask the question, you can't say a minor uplift to a bank manager without asking him, you know roughly how much a minor uplift would be.
The question is how much the people who build the PCs cost as an uplift. These are Dell machines, I believe, storage. So from Dell, that uplift, even though if you were to go out and buy 2 drives separately, that'd only be something like a 20 or 30 pounds difference. It can be up to £100 with Dell. Machine.
So if it's times 8 times, is it
Times 800.
Absolutely.
Not
It's not 1,000.
not tens of thousands.
It's going to be a lot less than that, but I can't guarantee it.
Okay, fine. I would like to make an in principle decision this evening, largely because as Mel said, the server is, I think he's in October. I think the server, if now to my mind, that means everything crashes. Apparently it isn't.
Literally just the fact that they're going to stop supporting the version of Windows that's running on it, which is Windows 7 2012 R2.
So I would, sorry.
So what that means is if no support, you've got no security patches. So going back on what Stephanie was saying regarding that potentially makes us open to being hacked into or data breach. So no support, no security update.
Okay.
So it is a risk, but it's not the biggest risk in the world.
Oh, so, okay, fine. I'd still like to make a decision this evening. So as far as I can see, we have two decisions, both with a couple of caveats or potentially additions. One is the decision on which option to go for, and within that, the other decision is to whether we go for laptops or purely and simply the desktops upgraded across the board, presumably would be slightly cheaper. I'll ask two questions, one of Mel and one of Michael, if I may. Mel, from an operational point of view, bearing in mind that we did have a situation where you know water the other day and everyone had to disappear off home and therefore were less than productive for a day because we work from home. From the operational point of view, are laptops preferable?
Most definitely, yes, absolutely. To be able to respond in emergency situations, but also if people have potential caring responsibilities rather than them having to take time off, they have the ability then to work from home. It certainly wouldn't be, we wouldn't be promoting it as the first option because we are a service delivery, so our place would be here in the office. But to have that ability to work from home, I think will be a real advantage for the council.
Thank you. And question for Michael, are there any disadvantages of either laptops over PC, desktops or desktops over laptops?
Really, no, they're pretty much the same thing. The only real difference that you get is with the video on laptops. They can laptops with dedicated graphics chips tend to be a lot more expensive. If you need that for your own requirements, you don't need that. So, yeah, much the same.
The only difference is the physical security of losing a laptop. Obviously, yeah.
But primarily they would be
Insured.
here anyway.
Yes.
They would only leave the premises if people were working from home. They would use them here.
Are our laptops encrypted? Do you know?
They would be, yes.
Can I ask a nosy question? Since COVID, lots of people are working from home and lots of companies have had to develop a remote working policy to cover occasionally walking up, well, sip me a cup of tea, push a button so it registers that you're working. Who would? Absolutely. As part of your experience, is it better to have a remote monitoring system that's in the computer, or is that something that can be bolted onto as and when we need it?
You can bolt things like that on. There are products that do exactly what you're saying, and we have a support agent that would be on all of the machines, and that allows us to get a lot of information, but it's not the same as spying on a user, which I think is where you're going.
Some companies do it. They have that little eye.
There are places we work with various clients that do exactly that, and they tend to be at the moment prohibitively expensive, but they are certainly available.
I'm not suggesting for a moment we spy on all our staff and they're at home working from home, but I'm just saying as long as we've got the ability to monitor what's being done, it's more of the.
Bear in mind, this is in a public meeting being recorded. I better not say which of my friends I'm perfectly well aware presses the button and then goes. I'm sure there are ways around everything. So can I just ask, subject to a couple of caveats, which I'll come in one on connection and one on some idea of cost comparison. Are there any thoughts on the minimum, the standstill, or the future proofing option? Future proofing to me seems to be a no-brainer, but I'm more than willing to take the views of other people who know more about these things than I do.
My personal view is I would endorse everyone having laptops. It makes people more efficient, more effective. Also gives them a greater degree of flexibility and trust. And from a future-proof perspective, that is the way forward.
So in terms of the actual decision then, future-proofing with laptops certainly seems to be very much preferred by one of our colleagues who knows more than some of the rest of us. Stephanie?
No, I'm voting for that option.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Thought you were going to offer us each column.
Well, I was, but Ian's conflated the two. So no, I was only going to go for the one that seemed to have most support around the table. So if we were to say two caveats, one, and here I would suggest if it's acceptable to this committee, it does not come back to this committee. Vice Chair and I, along with the town clerk and Ion, would probably take that decision on your behalf, but that's entirely your decision as to whether you would want this to come back to a future version of this committee. Satisfaction that the internet connection our existing internet connection, or at a relatively minor cost, to use a phrase, which I would imagine would be a minor cost, any upgrade on the internet connection. Subject to that and a broad brush cost comparison with West Berks, purely and simply to test this out. I would personally say, again, splitting suppliers in terms of IT, I would not say would be ideal. Therefore, I would personally say that cost comparison would have to be quite substantially in favour of using West Berks. I don't know if you've got any views on that, Ian.
I tend to agree with you. It's far better to have it one basket rather than split, because it just becomes too, left hand and right hand, too difficult.
Yeah.
My sort of thought process was they can do a sanity check, see if it makes sense.
So we will
go with it.
We will do sanity check.
Yeah.
With West Berks, but the primary feeling that I'm proposing is that we go with the future proofing plus laptops, get satisfaction that the internet connection is acceptable, and merely use WBC as a sanity check and go with it.
So back to my sort of point on the speed, it's a bit like when Christmas Day, everyone's got their brand new IT and we're all trying to use the internet and you see the speed just go down. It's just whether or not we're having 8 people accessing the cloud, uploading and downloading. What is the resilience? What's the minimum upload and download speeds which we need to have? Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So that is my proposal. If that finds a seconder. Thank you. Are there any other questions or indeed any other proposals?
Just one more question. I know it was mentioned about the 512 SSD. I do order laptops in my role. 512 seems a bit overkill, but as long as that's sanity checked and it is actually required and we're not just paying an extra £100 for the sake of paying an extra £100. As long as that can be checked out before we go ahead with that, because that's £500, but it's £500 that might not need spending.
And again, if committee is happy to leave that with the vice chair and chair in conjunction with advice from officers and supplier. So we have that proposal. Were there any counter proposals? Sorry. No. Okay. Could I ask for those in favour of that proposal, then, please? Unanimous. Thank you.
Chair, may I ask for the specification of the laptops which you're proposing to be sent, so I can then send it to response?
Michael has also very kindly said that if anyone has any questions after the meeting, because you know what it's like, you immediately have questions, he'd be very happy to
Thank you.
and let us have complete details. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate you coming along. Because I couldn't have answered any of those questions, so really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Good night. Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to the budget review. I have asked Mel to run a different report to the one that we've used in past years. The Realtas system that we use, which most small local authorities seem to also use, doesn't get a report that would do absolutely everything that we wanted to. So we are running this report now, which gives us the usual split between categories and or subject headings and the components of those subject headings, split into actual year to date, which is the actual spend, current annual, which is the total year budget, variance between those two, committed expenditure. I don't think, Madam Clerk, we can put into this report. This is one where we're looking to the committed. There seem to be some in there.
Yes. But if any figures are beneath in the committed expenditure column, that means a purchase order has been raised. So if there's no figure, then there's no outstanding purchase order against that budget line.
Funds available is basically the difference between the spend and the budget. And then crucially for the purposes of this report, the percentage spend, which all things being equal, and not all things are equal, you would expect that to be 25%. There are, however, considerable variances. For example, we get the precept twice a year, and we've had half the year's precept, so we've had half 50% of the precept. So it's not an exact science. We will go through some of the lines, no doubt, as we are looking at the lines and the variances. So what I intend to do is go through the report page by page. I think you all have it in front of you, so Mel doesn't have to scroll down at quite the speed that otherwise she would have to do. There are some that leap out, which I'm sure Mel can cover, and also any questions that we may have as a committee individually. Please shout as we go through. Page 1, scanning down, you may recall that the staff category 100 is a summary of all of the staffing. What we do is split out the staffing roughly pro rata with the amount of work and the salaries that are paid to the people doing that work, really to get an accurate cost comparison of things like the cemetery costs, of the allotment costs. It doesn't look as though we're making a massive surplus on either of those, because clearly there are some staff costs associated with them. The staffing line, staffing section at the top is merely a précis of all of the staffing sections. So we see, for example, there 3 months in, we're at 24.4% on overall staffing, which appears to be roughly spot on with where we would anticipate being. Page 1 then, please shout Ian.
Election expenses, so you've got a £6,000 budget, but we incurred no cost, but we did have an election on the 4th of May.
We haven't had the invoice in from West Berkshire yet.
Okay, so do we know, we don't approve things, we just post things on an invoice received basis?
Yeah, that would be in the committed line. We have not, although the finance manager is looking at it, we have not got away yet, apart from, because we don't know what the invoice is going to be, for example.
It's a guesstimate. Otherwise.
Okay.
We could do a guesstimate and put that in the
Do you want me to?
committed.
Okay, I will expect it, yeah, I will try and get that invoice to you as soon as possible. Wearing my West Berkshire hat.
Said the head of finance for West Berkshire District Council.
Yes.
I'm sure you have better need of the money than
Yeah.
well, if we owe the money, it's appropriate to pay it. I would point out we do accrue every year for election expenses, so this is not we're not expecting that bill to be 6,000. I mean, it'd be wonderful if it was, but we're expecting something substantially higher than that, Stephanie.
Because I take it that we always have in mind that there could be a by-election.
Yeah.
So we keep a sum of money available, otherwise we couldn't hold an election.
Yes, we don't want too many by-elections, so
Be careful crossing the road.
if people, yes, precisely, if people avoid being run over by a double-decker bus, it would be greatly appreciated. We have actually upped the amount that we are putting into the earmark reserve for election expenses this year, which is 6,000. We will actually see what the invoice actually is from West Berks when it comes through. We may need to up that slightly to do exactly as Stephanie says and accrue for potential by-elections. Jane?
Can I just ask at the bottom of the page under grants, the first one there is permitted hours. I'm not sure what that is.
I'll defer that to the clerk.
That is our community grant fund. So twice a year, the grant subcommittee meets and considers applications from the Good Exchange. And that's the budget that funds that.
So basically we have 17,000 pounds available for, they tend to be the larger ones. We have another fund which we'll look at when we come to reserves. For the smaller grants, indeed, we have a small grant application in front of us later on the agenda. Are there any more questions on page 1? No, we'll move to page 2 then. Anything you want to turn page 2 and Clark before we start?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on page? Stephanie.
Yes, sorry, line 4724, the grant to the Citizens Advice Bureau. That's in Newbury, isn't it? Or is it?
Oh.
And here's that it closes, then it opens, and I thought at one point we lost it. Who's that going to?
Oh,
We have a service level agreement with the Citizens Advice, and this is for their Thatcham outreach. So they do, they have not meetings, what's the word?
sessions, counselling, so.
Yes, sessions in Thatcham. I think they're at the Birdwood surgery.
I've never even heard of it and I don't know it exists. It needs,
Lack of publicity from CAB.
but it needs a bit better publicity.
Yeah, but Ian?
I'm the West Berkshire trustee representative on the board of DAB.
It's your fault.
I've just received this afternoon an invitation to their AGM 2:30 on Wednesday, and I will raise your concern.
Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's worth having dual-hatted councillors too.
I give, I say.
Exactly.
For the new councillor, do we push services like that on the Thatcham Town Council page that what is available? Is that something we do or could we start doing so that it gets the word out there about not just this one, but other organisations that we support?
Yeah.
Absolutely, and I'm sure the current chairman of the Community Engagement Working Party will know that there's lots and lots of things like that that we could and should be doing, but we just don't have the resource. But yes, absolutely, that sort of thing. The Working Party has highlighted already, haven't we, Councillor? So.
Yeah, indeed. So I think, sorry.
No, sorry, I was battling separately. Sorry.
And I'll leap in.
Yeah, I think it comes down to priorities really, but there are a lot of groups within the serving the immediate community that we'd like to publicise. And yeah, it's also getting a more regular programme of publicity going through our social media. And once we have our new website in place, that will be another place where we'll be publicising things in a more ordered way.
It was very noticeable. Sorry, Stephanie, I will bring you in. It was very noticeable, the traffic on social media and things being put on the website hugely increased when we had an intern. It was a gentleman who was effectively work experience, I think, from college. In fact, we had two years running, I think. They were there to promote the events and they were there with us for a couple of months. But the amount of traffic hugely increased during that time. And then obviously once they'd gone, there was no one there to pick that up. So yeah, there is a question of priorities. There is a wider question of resource within that, which Mel and I have started to have discussions on. And that will largely be informed by the results of the ideas and thoughts that councillors have as expressed on last Saturday. Sorry, Stephanie, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, I just suddenly thought, did we hear since May that you do have plans to do something to the website? The reason I ask is, about an hour ago, I was on Thatcham Town Council website twice, and I managed to get 2 questions answered from the website. But it does look a little bit staid, a little bit old-fashioned. And as Petra said, Councillor Pemberton said, we should have a lot more community information up on that website for people to find by links or by visual.
Yeah.
So is the website going to be updated and reviewed and whatever?
Once we have the priorities for the council wish to do, if that's high on the list of priorities, it will be done. If it's something nobody wants, it won't be. But I suspect it's more likely to be the former rather than the latter. Apologies, I did see a hand. Justin, sorry.
Yeah, I guess following on from what Stevenson said, when we have,
I have to say, I do tend to use first names in committees. Full council, I personally tend to use, but I'm more than happy if you use first names.
Point that Steph made, sorry, about sort of upgrading the general content on the town council website is a valid one, and it's an issue that came up in the environmental working party group discussion the other week, when we had an outside member of the committee offering to help with that. Now, you know, the extent to which people are able to add information to the website is obviously something that can be discussed in the fullness of time. But I do think it's something that needs to be taken forward as a priority. And I get these conversations around it's prioritising time, it's prioritising money. They're all valid arguments, but already in my head, you know, things like the work that the CAB do. I was looking on Facebook today, the town council was promoting the services of the Thatcham Larder. There's lots and lots of really useful information that we can include around things to do with the cost of living, around financial difficulties that people might be experiencing, around the council's green agenda. It can be grouped into various headers. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a programmer, I don't write websites, but it can be done. if some thought is given to what kind of information we want to see on there, at least start that conversation and then the content should follow. But it does need to happen. It hasn't had a proper upgrade. That's the right word to use. It seems to me for quite a while.
Chair, with your other hat, I think this is an ideal opportunity to talk with Kennett Academy. They have A-level computer science students there. No doubt have to do a project for their A-level, redoing a website. Would be straight down their street, especially with all the community-based information. When we did the Hemingway report, they said, you know, coming back from the children, wasn't enough information what's going on in Thatcham.
I shall
leave that with
I
you.
shall take that action, most certainly, yeah.
And the beauty of it is it becomes a rolling project because you still, each year you have new A-level students coming through. New ideas.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, thank you. From the perspective of the Community Engagement Working Party, which really hasn't been operating since the election because it's actually been reformed this evening. So we haven't sort of discussed it in detail over the last couple of months, but we were right up until the end of the last term, we were doing a lot of work on this. And there are definitely two elements, particularly with the website. One is the provision of packages that are, you know, designed, purpose built and designed for local authority, you know, for local councils, and that have the right structure that's widely recognised and used from one council to another, so that you go from one place to another, and it has a sort of the right look and feel. It's designed to hold the right sort of information. The other part is making sure that information is fully populated and regularly updated, and that's where we need people out in the community, we need people in the schools, we need people in the clubs and so on to make sure that you know, that they're providing that updated information. But certainly in terms of, you know, what the what's available for the website, you know, there are a number of options which would be quite attractive for us.
Can I bring that one, please, to a close, because we are here to actually scrutinise the budget.
Not an IT strategy.
Are there any other questions on the finances on page 2?
Apologies.
No, it's a perfectly valid thing, and these things need to be raised, but we need to be conscious of the primary function.
What street or footpath do we pay electricity for? Lighting?
Oh,
Wow,
Madam
it's a
Clerk.
bit bizarre.
yeah, it is. Madam Clerk.
We are responsible for 12 random streetlights across Thatcham, usually ones that aren't on the public highway.
Okay.
Yes, so.
Okay.
Well,
Okay, 12 streetlights.
12 street
Why?
hours. So historic agreements that go.
Council's probably refused to provide one, so the town's short with water.
Surely the admin of you paying bills, or was it direct or whatever? It seemed a bit bizarre.
it is. Even more bizarre, I think we were paying £10 per annum quarterly at one point in time for something. We now managed to get that annual. But yes, extremely odd. Page 3, any questions on page 3? Again, Madam Clerk, anything particularly want to bring to our attention on this one?
Chairman, just the health and safety under 114 public conveniences, and you see that's sitting at 157%. That is because the defib pads needed to be exchanged.
I would ask, it's actually a question that covers quite a lot of areas. Service contracts seem to be at a level quite the way through the piece, and I believe planned maintenance as well, possibly with. Could you tell us how the funding of those? How the the invoicing of those works and why some are so high.
Yes, of course, Chairman. Service contracts, so we rate, these are all our routine things, for example, fire alarm tests and what else, window cleaning, all these things that we have contracts on a regular basis. So purchase orders have been raised at the start of the year for all of those items. So for example, this one here under the public conveniences, service contracts is sitting at 88%. That is pretty much the expenditure for the whole year ahead on that one. And with regard to planned maintenance, because it is planned maintenance, it's things that we budgeted for when we were preparing the draft budgets last year. Once the budget has been adopted and the expenditure approved, we can just get on and do those tasks. So again, that is doing everything at the start of the financial year, which is why the percentages on those lines would be higher than the average 25%. Many others are at this time of the financial year.
But the actual anticipated expenditure is still within the overall budget?
Correct, yes.
Mostly.
Thank you. Any other questions on page? Move on to page 4, if you may. Anyone got anything on page 4 in particular?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Obviously, things like Thatcham Festival at the moment. Thatcham Festival being in October, there won't be a huge amount of expenditure for, and ditto Christmas won't have happened clearly yet. Page 5. Again, anything you want to bring to our attention?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, is much still come from the United Service of Remembrance? Consider.
The main expenditure for that event is the hire of the gazebo. So that's still to come in. With the purchase order, you can see has been raised 1136.
1136, yeah. And a little bit obviously on Family Fun Day on the bottom, but we'll move over to page 6 for the majority of the.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Back to page 5.
Yep.
Under remembrance, there isn't anything there for the cost of road closures.
Traffic management.
Traffic management, thank you very much. And that's actually paid to whom? To West Berkshire Council?
West Berkshire Council, yes.
It's a sort of license to be allowed to close the road.
I think it, well, Madam Clerk will know better than I think it essentially covers their costs plus no doubt a bit of a margin. Madam Clerk?
But also the majority of that cost is the company that actually physically closed the road for us.
Right.
I'm sure Councillor Cottingham will reassure us that it's perfectly.
Can I just very briefly report, I went to the Royal British Legion annual conference and several delegates raised that they can't hold a service of remembrance because they can't afford the road closure fees. And when you see it is this sort of money, I'm not surprised if they're a small council.
Again, we talk about priorities. This council made a decision many years ago when we had a particularly disastrous remembrance service where lorries were going by at 30 miles an hour and people were hooting and really only knows what else. We made the decision at that point in time that it was, well, we consider the time money well spent. New council, new rules. So, but on that one, I personally would hope we would keep the aforesaid. Page 6. Move on to right. Family Fun Day. I'm presuming, Madam Clerk, that we actually had, well, we obviously had more stallholder fees and grants received than were anticipated. I would imagine there are still some expenditures to come in on Family Fun Day?
There are, Chairman, yes. Just to highlight line 4049 refreshments. Although it's not good to be over budget on that line, justification of it is the volume of volunteers that we had. This is, we provide refreshment money for our volunteers on the day. So the fact that we had so many this year, it is what has pushed that budget line up.
In percentage terms, I think it's extremely high in actual monetary terms, relatively low. Tom?
Yeah, that was one of the minor funds that I was looking through. That if you go through the agenda, you'll see that there is some other budget variations. Well, of course, we've got to allow for flexibility within what we do. To allow for things like the more people turn up, therefore the budget goes up and down. It's a couple of £100 here and a couple of £100 there. Is fair enough, but I was just trying to work out in principle what do we as the financial controlling committee, how do we feel about things so early on in the process already being overspent from a management perspective, because these 40, 50s, 100, 200, 300 and you'll go on further on through the budget as a principle. I'm not against short-term expenses and even unexpected expenses. But I was just wondering about how we manage that for the future. We shouldn't make the budget an absolute cap, but I certainly think if there's things that come in, we shouldn't be finding out about it 2 months later that we spent £1,000 more than we had actually budgeted for. So more trying to find out how do we manage that? Because again, new to this, it's what have you traditionally done? What's been the monitoring process for that? Did we only meet 4 times a year?
Yeah. The financial regulations actually cover that, and that particular point and discretion we've been historically given to the clerk is probably the best answer to that. If I can ask my clerk to explain what the process is.
Absolutely, yeah. It is all set out in financial regulations that we adhere to. There is provision in there that if service delivery is at risk of being disrupted, then I do have authority to make those decisions in consultation with chairman and vice chairman. Yes, but it's all set out in the financial regs.
I think the key one probably is at what stage would chair and vice chair of this committee be involved? At what stage would the committee itself be involved? Now we can look at the financial regulator. I don't.
No, it's more about the idea of you don't want to be involved in anything under £500. That doesn't give you carte blanche to spend over £500 in every budget item. But at some point, somebody's got to come in and say, you need to go back to.
We will, if it's the committee's wish that we go through the financial regulations, not this committee, but the future committee, then by all means we will, because that actually covers the in principle, because the discretion's there are laid down.
Is there a financial number to the principle? Is there set, like for example, you can spend up to £5,000 without going back to committee? Is there a number to that, or is it just wording and then judgment? Without going into too much detail, because it's such a.
Chairman, I think it depends on the individual situations. Is there a particular line in this report, Councillor McCann, that is causing you concern? Because I don't think any of our budgets are that much over.
Yeah, 4067, read page 12 as an example, where we've gone £3,000 885 over budget forecast.
Page 13, sorry, did you say?
Page 12.
Oh, sorry.
Where it says 4067. There's that one,
Yeah, so
There is other like that. What I'm trying to say is not criticising the process. I'm just trying to understand what the process is, because we only meet 4 times a year, one of which is setting the budget. We only get 3 bites at the cherry, if you see what I'm saying.
In the circumstance of this inspection contract, I think is the one that you're referring to, Tom. I do know about this one because we had we have a split with the inspection contracts for playgrounds. We have in the past had is it Hog, who did all of the inspection contracts, weekly inspections of our playgrounds to make sure that they are basically fit for purpose. There are no loose screws, bolts, etc. And as an early identification of the potential problems that we might have in the future. This year, for this year's budget, previous council changed that round so that we now have fortnightly inspections by HARG and fortnightly inspections, in other words, so we still get weekly inspections, but HARG do one a fortnight, and the new maintenance officer, who was trained up to do inspections, also did one a fortnight. So they were still covered on a weekly basis, but essentially half of the inspections were brought in-house. Unfortunately, we had a service officer, a maintenance officer who came in, was trained up, and then for health reasons and mutual parting of the waves, left. So essentially, we've been asking HARG to do the weekly inspections, hence that particular line is going over. So we need to look at financial regulations again to see whether, and you and I probably sit down with Mel and look at financial regulations again offline to actually see whether we need a monetary value, whether a monetary value would be good, whether a percentage value would be sensible. But that's a discussion to be had offline. As I say, new council, new rules. We'll make the adaptations as we need. Justin.
Yeah, so similar vein to obviously to Tom, if we're looking at the variance for individual items and percentage budget spent, I noticed that in relation to the Family Fun Day, there's a bit of an overspend on the entertainment. What sort of things come under that category of expenditure? Because obviously where the town council is putting the event on, what direct entertainment costs are we incurring to run that?
No.
that will be some of the activities we bring in, for example, the climbing tower, we pay to bring that in, but then we charge for people to use it. So the cost of hiring it will go under entertainment. We brought in the people doing what they were called now, but they were doing like a mock birds of prey demonstration. So that's entertainment that's brought in. And a few other bits and pieces that, because it's not all, although a lot of the stalls provide entertainment, the actual main attractions we buy in.
The still for people.
The stills, yes, and the glitter pickers.
Punch and Judy, things like
Punch
that.
and Judy, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, but the point,
It's quite a big overspend. I mean, it's
that's the point, isn't that a known expense? That thing, that's your point.
Can I just,
So we-
can you talk about 4073?
Yeah.
Because that's only 50%. 50% of budget spent.
4073.
Page 4, we're talking.
Page 6, I think.
Another 4073, sorry.
Yeah, the 4073s, the ones on the far left-hand column are repeated in quite a lot of the
I forgot that.
main section.
The line above, the supplies is at 307, but that's a total of 166 against the £55. Yeah, but it's.
That answers my question. Thank you.
Any other questions on page 6? Ian?
Actually,
Okay. If there's no other questions on page 6, page 7, Ian.
yeah, it's wearing my chair or cricket club hat. So the rent received actually year to date would be 3 months. And effectively we pay £777 per quarter. So I'm struggling to understand why you've received £3,200 already year to date for cricket club rent.
I can answer that. That's the whole year's invoice.
Right.
We invoice at the beginning of the year. It's broken down into 4.
Yeah, we make the payments, yeah, understood, right.
Processes.
Okay, process rather than the cash which we pay, but let's make sure I got the right amount. So, which is, I think it's 3,109, but that's fine. There'll be a bit of inflation in there. Okay, that's fine, understood.
Any other queries on page 7? Moving on to page 8. No queries on page 8. We'll move on to page 9.
I do have page 8. Why have we got negative audit fees? We're getting money back.
Because we accrue, because the audit that is taking place now refers to last financial year.
Yeah.
We accrue the expenditure from last year and the bill will come in this year. We haven't had it yet.
Okay. That infers that we've released money having a negative charge.
Because when the bill comes in, if it's 2,200, that presumably would bring us actual year to date
0.
nil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which
And then we
is-
accrue again at the end of this year because the audit takes place outside of the financial year that it refers to. So we always accrue it and then pay it in the following year. So the accrual is in the year that it applies
Yeah,
to.
not too sure on the accounting for
Might need to look at that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're effectively saying that we're paying nothing this year, but
Correct,
where does
yes.
the accrual come in? If there's an accrual in, then that actual year to date should be nil rather than one. We'll take that
Yeah, take that
offline. We'll
offline.
talk that with the finance manager as well. If we may. That was page 8, page 9.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I haven't quite understood what the bankers down that end of the table have been talking about. What I'd like to ask in simple layman's terms is, it appears to me that the Birdwood and the Frank Hutchins cost us a fortune. And am I right? We don't get enough income. Trying to see the difference, particularly from the Birdwood, to cover the outgoings.
Correct.
Oh,
And
I did understand it.
and we have not ever since I've been on this council,
Years and years.
those 2 halls have run at a loss. It's something that we have, or previous council identified as an imperative to actually try and get that figure up, to the extent that we started a working party prior to the election. I'm not sure it's met after the election. I'm not sure it's still been formed post-election. But it is something we are. Frank Hutchins hall is boosted considerably by the fact that one hall of the two halls is let to.
I was going to ask, has the therapy centre made that a better situation for the Frank Hutchins?
Yes, the loss would, I think if they were in there, the loss would probably be higher. Birdwood, I think from memory, has suffered from preschools closing, and a lot of preschools are closing. Basically, the free places that they are being offered are not being covered by what they receive from central government. So a lot are closed within West Berkshire. And general hirers, Thatcham is actually oversupplied with halls.
Yes.
Which is why if we had any more substantial housing, the last thing really we probably need is another hall. But that seems to be what has traditionally always been put in. Let's put it.
Yeah, everybody needs a good.
If you top up all of the halls locally, I don't think any of them are making much, if anything.
And they're all sort of similar size and shape as well. So, yeah,
And they
out stages and. Yeah.
precisely.
Thank
So
you.
yes, you are perfectly correct.
Thank you.
So page 9 we just covered, I believe. Page 10, we have any clues on that? We have none. Page 11. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say, question in relation to page 10.
Yeah.
I noticed the figure for vandalism's quite high, and obviously I know the reason for that. When that kind of damage is repaired, and for example, we claim off our insurance, we get some money back in whatever form. Is that then recorded in the accounts somewhere else as a kind of contra entry, so it doesn't look obviously quite as bad?
I think it's included under each section. I believe Madam Clerk will tell us.
It would be it would be recorded at the top here under the income codes. We have a line for insurance claims. This particular one, the funds from the insurance came in last financial year, but the company doing the work weren't able to do it until this financial year. So unfortunately, there is a slight discrepancy on that line, but usually they should almost tally out the vandalism lines with insurance income.
There are some that are not covered under.
Our excess is sometimes £100, sometimes 250. So it's about weighing up whether it's worth claiming or not.
Yeah, we've seen in the press recently. So when is the insurance paid and when does the policy come through?
1st of June is our renewal date each year.
So we've already had the renewal come in. Was it significantly higher than last year?
No, it wasn't. We're in a 3-year agreement.
Ah.
This is year 2 of a 3-year agreement.
That's one thing which has gone through the roof is insurance. Actually. And does it cover indemnity against officers as well as cyber insurance, or is it just for the bricks and mortar?
No, there's all sorts of levels of cover in there. I can send you a copy of.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see what we have. Thank you.
Yeah, interesting thought. We may have to start planning this year for a substantial increase in 2 years' time. Definitely.
This has brought to mind a memory from the past when I was last on the town council, which is a while ago. We used to call the Moors Pavilion the money pit, because all we did was pile in more security that was then vandalised. We had steel doors that were vandalised. It's just an attraction. I don't know why they love to go down there and bash it up, but they always have, and perhaps they always will. Just a thought, sorry. Just came to my mind.
Thank you for that. Page 11.
Can I just ask a question with regards to the partnership contributions for Hennick Field? The 9,000. Just ask an explanation as to what that.
Yeah, there's two questions. There's that, what he did, and there's mine, how come it's negative?
Our agreement with West Berkshire Council, so Hennick is owned by West Berkshire Council. It's leased to Thatcham Town Council. It's managed by West Berkshire Council. So as part of the agreement, there is a share of, a share of the expenditure of the site is, I think it's roughly about 60% West Berks cover, 40% we cover. And it's usually in the region, generally it's been around about the 40,000 mark. Because of COVID, some of the hirers changed during the course of 2 or 3 years. So we budgeted an additional 10,000 this year. I'm just trying to think why we've accrued £9,999. And I would need to look at that and have a chat with the finance manager. That's an accrual. That's why it's reading like that, but I'm not sure why. So I will.
How long is the lease then? How long is our lease with them? 5, 10,
Whatever.
15?
It's a very, very long
Is there a
lease.
get out clause for us?
I think there probably is. I mean, it's something that's been looked at for many years, but never has been resolved, let's say.
I think it's fair to say that the Hennick Worthy Field is just run by a joint management company. Hennick Leisure Centre is run by a joint advisory committee. And the discrepancy, the difference between the two is significant in that we don't seem to have any control over Hennick Leisure Centre with we have theoretically a lot of clout with the JMC. I don't think traditionally the JMC, I think it didn't have a West Berkshire representative on. I think I'm right in saying, Madam Clerk, for a couple of years during the previous 4-year period. So I don't think it has been excessively effective. We did have 1 year where we had a total surprise in terms of we had a budget and everyone was saying the budget was being kept to, but suddenly we were asked to make a larger contribution. I think under the current chairmanship and current makeup that we have for the JMC, which includes certainly Councillor Brooks, Councillor Pike. Councillor Lillycrop, you on there?
Not on that one, no.
I think the scrutiny of the Joint Management Committee is going to be vastly improved. But it's always been
an anomaly.
I don't like surprises. And suddenly having a surprise as we had a few years ago where we suddenly had to contribute more is the type of thing I don't like. So they are developing procedures whereby we will get quarterly management figures, or hasn't it got to that?
It should be quarterly, yes.
So we will start to know what is being accrued.
And this will normally come through recreation amenities anyway, further monitoring before it gets to this committee, I would assume.
I believe so, yeah.
So if there's any questions to be asked, we can at least run through that from there.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair.
I did see a couple of hands. Apology. Okay.
Sorry, it was possibly a bit of a silly question, but as a newbie, what do we use the field for if we're renting it at such a cost? Why?
It's essentially a small p political decision for provision of recreational amenities to the citizens of West Berkshire. And because it is located in Thatcham, we tend to contribute more, we tend to have more usage than the 18% of the population within West Berkshire that you would normally think that Thatcham would contribute. Now, again, nothing is written in stone, and therefore there could theoretically be a renegotiation of that discussion. But it is essentially for recreational facilities.
It's for a good facility, it's just a bit curious. The structure was curious. That's the
that was probably agreed when Stephanie was last on the council. Going back that long ago, from using her words, not mine. Ian?
Good illustration is 13 play there every other Saturday, Newbury 13 play cricket there every other Saturday, and we both pay a rent to West Berkshire to hiring the pitch. So there'll be organisations in West Berkshire who will pay a rental income, a higher income rather, to using those facilities for football and rugby, I would guess.
Yeah. The hockey club is also Thatcham Hockey Club.
Also, I suppose we would have got the fun day free of charge as part of that 50,000 as well.
Yeah. Don't think we pay any. I think on the fun day do.
Yeah.
Any more questions on page 11? By the way, you do not need to preface any question with "this may be a silly question," but there are no silly questions. They are all ones that probably other people around this table, possibly including me, think, oh,
so my question is in two parts. Burial fees.
Yes.
Yep.
Is there a regulated amount which we charge? And how do we compare against other town councils and how much we charge, and what is a EROB fee?
Both questions, Madam Clerk, is more than capable of answering.
EROB is exclusive right of burial, and the holder of the EROB does not own that piece of land, but they own the rights to inter in that piece of land and or erect a memorial stone.
Okay.
The fees are set annually by this committee, and that will be at the January meeting. So it will go through the budget as draft figures that will be confirmed at the January S&GP meeting.
Okay. How do we compare?
And we do obtain, so it will be the cemetery, halls, market, all those sorts of things will all be bought in one report with examples of the fees charged locally.
Okay.
There's
an opportunity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. In previous years, the cemetery and the halls fees were set by RNA rather than this committee. But on the discussion I had with the clerk, they're now going to be set by this committee as part of the budget process. Because we might get ridiculous situations where RNA come up with a figure that FGP don't agree with. We, as Councillor McCann has already said, are the ultimate arbiters when it comes to finance. Sorry, I'll take step.
Before Tom blasts, the cemetery is costing us a lot of money. So too are the allotments. So before we start thinking about that, we obviously need to think that these are the services a town council is providing to its residents. So we might say, well, are we charging enough for the allotments? Are we charging enough for people to be buried? But we've also got to think that in the end, who else do they go to if they want to be buried if it ain't to us? And who else do they go to get that extra little garden plot but us? So, yes, of course, we might be able to vary the charges, but these are what they pay there and what I pay and what we all pay our charge to the council for.
There is a non-resident of Thatcham will pay more to be buried in Thatcham Cemetery than a resident of Thatcham, which has caused some things in the past where people have moved out of Thatcham to go into a nursing home in Newbury. We have taken a view on that. If they lived in Thatcham for 50 years and suddenly moved for 1 year into a nursing home. So that's a view that we have.
And indeed, may I conclude to say that the most expensive things are the play areas, but you can't ban children.
Not yet.
Councillor McCann is his way, obviously.
The childcare.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's absolutely right that F&GP effectively are setting the budget, and any charges come up through the committee structure to here. I think that's absolutely perfectly reasonable. But it does beg the question, are you actually having enough meetings to get that information beforehand? Because I looked up before I actually came out. Events have 5 meetings, pool is 8. R&A has 5, plans have 8, plans for obvious reasons. And this committee only has 4.
Good question. Do you mind if we don't debate it tonight?
No, it's
We will
more,
take.
it's just more about highlighting the point.
Exactly.
Be the decision maker, you actually have to meet more often to do the decision, making the decision. That was brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a very, very valid point. And it's one we will discuss further offline. Yeah.
Can I counter Councillor Stevenson's point over the allotments? It's no different from my perspective with the monies which we service for recreation, sporting, and then the argument is, you know, mental health, physical health perspective, the allotments provide a fantastic service, and also protects.
I was being positive.
And to quote our current Prime Minister, we won't be concreting over the green lands of Britain, as he said this evening.
Good for him.
Yes.
Oh, that's a relief.
Just one point on the right of burial fees that Mel mentioned, asked about. It's as an indication of how fickle these things are. We actually brought the ROB budget, which is hardly a budget because we can't control it, down substantially this year because we had massively we had over provided the previous year based on that prior year figure, and the right of burial fees did not appear. Now we seem to be in a position where we've had half the anticipated income within the first year. Obviously, that the cemetery income is probably the hardest one to judge because great. So cemetery income is down. That means fewer of our residents are dying, to put it mildly.
We want to be buried.
And being buried, or cremated and being buried in the plot. Right, page 11 concluded, hopefully, page 12. On page 12.
Just to touch on my point earlier. If there's no maintenance man inspecting them, there would be a financial saving on the cost of no maintenance man being budgeted to check and inspect. Therefore, would that not counter?
We have now recruited.
I'm on about what you've done. This is for inspections.
Yeah.
Past tense, wouldn't it be?
Oh, sorry, the inspection overspend. You mean there will have been a saving. The issue in part with that is that it takes a while to train someone. They have to be trained by, I don't remember the name of the trainer, but they have to be trained in that particular aspect. You don't. It's not a question of checking whether all the bolts are tight. But there will have been a saving in staff costs at some point, but probably not as much. The costings when we did them for last year's budget was a considerable saving if we did the fortnightly planned maintenance in-house rather than the external firm doing it. The decision was made at that point. We would continue with the external firm and the internal firm. Again, new council, new rules. We may consider that for next year's budget to be another line that we can see some savings on. If no more questions on page 12, oh, yes, Ian.
It's just more of a total question. Vandalism seems a hell of a lot. If you total it all up, it must be getting on for about 50k. Costs going through it all. How much is it?
Do we have it?
I haven't got it.
I don't think it will be anything near 50k.
Like this in the current annual. So
on which, sorry, which
well,
page, which line are we looking?
just about every page there is a cost for vandalism. So on page 13, there's 4,250. The next page is another 8 grand. There's 12 grand. That's another 750. That's 13. So if you work your way through it all,
we are in a section where the majority of these are the majority of the council assets, and therefore would be more subject to vandalism. We've tended to keep the vandalism in the budget reasonably cautious and therefore reasonably high.
okay, so it's a bit of
because if we do get an awful lot of minor petty vandalism, that it's not worth claiming for.
yeah, understood.
So we've always taken the view when setting the budget that we would be more prudent by putting the vandalism line in possibly nearer the gross figure rather than the net figure.
It just seems such a shame that we have this line in the budget.
It is dispiriting.
The way the world
I
is.
know, I know.
Regrettably.
No, just
Any more on page 13? And page 14 are the totals. So effectively, percentage spent on expenditure so far, 26.4, of which a chunk is committed with the service contracts. So very broadly speaking, without going literally line by line and totting it all up, we are about where we should be, Madam Clerk.
Absolutely, Chairman.
And the income lines slightly higher, which is probably interesting. We had, I think, in line with the rest of the world or rest of the country, we anticipated that interest rates would be coming down faster than they actually have, which from our perspective, we get quite a lot of surplus funds at various points in the half year. Is actually quite useful.
So, sorry, before we move on, I'm going to ask one of those stupid questions. So, our annual expenditure is around 1.2 million, something like that. Our income is about, I don't know, give or take 900 something thousand, just under 1 million per annum, broad brush. And that's what tends to happen most years.
Then nearer in balance,
Right.
than that, with because the income generated is Frank Hutchins Hall. You know that it's not the net, but when you're looking at income and expenditure,
yeah.
On for example the last page, you're actually looking at those figures on there. So broadly speaking, we are usually in and around balance. We have actually budgeted for a loss here, or an expenditure of 25,000 from memory, excess of expenditure over income, largely because we wish to keep the precept as low as we could, commensurate with running a council with sufficient budget to operate. So we are effectively taking that from reserves, the budget.
Yeah, I would say any revenue income ideas will be greatly received.
Absolutely. Especially on the halls, that's
Yeah.
something which is
We can think
in
of,
fact better brains than I for many years. So if there are any thoughts on that short of
Knocking them down, yeah.
Selling them.
Building flats on them.
It's differentiation, making them sufficiently different from all the other halls of similar size.
yeah, I think it is differentiation. Although the proposal for knocking down and building flats was actually proposed by another organisation for the hall that they run a few years back, which caused a bit of an uproar. So yeah, it's an option, but I think
I know,
there are many options we would
Flip it.
probably
What about flip?
council to cover a bit rather than that. We'll now move on, if we may, to the 4 sheet, which should be in your pack, which is the council's reserves, which I have lost. Oh, there now. Which is the reserve. So this here. Just a reminder on some of these figures, because although we did cover it, it took me ages to flow into. So I'll keep repeating until you tell me I don't need to. We have right at the top the general reserves. We have the general fund minimum reserve, 220,000. That is essentially it's not mandatory anymore. It used to be mandatory. But it is a reserve that NALC and our auditors suggest that we keep to cover any catastrophic situations that there may be, plane crashing on the town council offices and other things that you never think are going to happen until they do. The general fund working balance, the line under that, is the general amount that we have available. I would caveat that slightly in that the additions to fund from last year's supposed surplus are still in discussions between myself and the finance manager and Rialtas as to whether the reporting on that one is totally accurate. The next section is earmarked reserves. These are reserves that have been put away for, or apart from the last few lines, the bottom few lines, these are reserves that have been put away for known or anticipated future expenditures in future years. So flood alleviation, for example, £30,000 in there. We are aware that that is the contribution that we have agreed to make once the various flood alleviation works around Thatcham are completed. And therefore that is in there so that it doesn't come out of this year's budget as a one hit. We have previously provided for it, election expenses being another one. The ones down the bottom, which total about 21,000, are the EMR SIL, Community Infrastructure Levy, again split in various years. These are essentially the developer contributions that West Berks get 90% of, we get 10% of currently. And they are for use for capital items only. There is a prescription on what we can and can't use those for, but essentially it's not for replacements, it's for new. When does a replacement become new? That's a discussion that we have with the SIL officer at West Berkshire. We did cover these at the sort of training session, but are there any queries that we have on the reserves?
Yeah, earmarked reserves. I thought you weren't really allowed to use lumps of money for ongoing expenses. Like, for example, you'd get service level agreements for the library. And that's an ongoing annual cost
For 3 years, yeah.
for 3 years.
Yeah.
So you're taking out earmarked reserves.
Hmm.
So it's a rolling thing, whereas earmark.
We know we are
Is it-
committed to expenditure
Yeah,
on those, so we've taken the view that it's really what I like to try and get to is how much cash have we got for other stuff?
Yeah.
And if we take out some things that we know we have committed expenditures for, and the library is different to the Kennet Leisure Centre, for example. So I accept there is a discrepancy between those two, because we've got the earmark, we haven't got an earmark reserve for Kennet Leisure Centre because we know that's coming out. So I accept that there's a discrepancy. My view that I took, rightly or wrongly, is if we have something that we know is going to be expended, that is not an ongoing forever, then we will take it out and put it into an earmark reserve, so we know we have that money separate from the budget. Now we can talk about that.
okay, so now I understand the history, but it makes it a bit clearer why there's effectively ongoing costs coming out of earmarked reserve pots of money. Then at least I understand why, rather than it being a budget item in one of the appropriate lines there, and that's why it's lumped together here. That's okay, that's just because I didn't really get.
Yeah, no, but perfectly legitimate question. Yeah.
Reserves, what is the cash reconciliation to this? So this is obviously from a balance sheet perspective. What is the physical cash which underpins reserves, and what's the reconciliation?
The reconciliation is usually further down the agenda. He said desperately looking for it under item 13.
13.3.
Okay, sorry.
So we will get to the bank reconciliation particularly. Sure. But again, good question, because councils run on cash. Are there any other questions on the reserves? No, thank you. Move on then to item 7, appointment of working parties. Again, that you have in front of you. Mel, could you talk us through this one, please?
So 2 working parties reporting to this committee. The investment will look at the 5 investment accounts that the council has. In black, that's what the terms of reference were last year. But actually, we're in the process now of adopting a treasury management plan. So it seems a little daft to try and summarise that into brief terms of reference. So my recommendation is in red that we refer to the investment working party will adhere to the adopted treasury management plan. And if that finds favour with committee, it will require all council approval because it is delegating authority to the investment working party. But the way that accounts can change, so almost overnight, it needs to be able to have an immediate response to things. So hence the recommendation of changing the terms of reference for that one.
Stephanie?
However, I'm going to leap in before Councillor Pemberton does to say at the Environmental Working Party the other evening, we thought another dimension should be added to the best possible interest rates. We thought the ethics of the banks that we bank with should also be taken into consideration.
So maybe that could be incorporated into whatever treasury management plan is agreed. I think, what you're suggesting seems the most efficient way of dealing with those kind of decisions.
I think an attempt to define ethical might be different.
But you asked the bank.
Kind of you see it, when you see it. So I think there would.
I think maybe if a Saudi bank was offering 2 percentage points over base against everyone else, we probably would not want to go down that route, as an example.
Yeah. I think also from a financial point of view, if anyone's offering 2% above market rate, you wouldn't want to touch them with the barge pole anyway. Like Icelandic banks spring to mind. But yeah, good point. Yeah.
So from a segregation of duties perspective, would want to make sure there's sufficient control that not one person has the ability to select and press the button. It needs to be at least two-way. Someone being able to make the choice and then send the funds. So there needs to be someone else doing that as well.
So in terms of the physical transfer.
Yes, physical transfer, making sure that it's been signed off. So not one person has control of the entire process.
Takes 2 signatures to move money about.
Yeah.
It's the easy way of explaining it.
Yeah.
Our bank account requires 2 signatures and 2 councillors' signatures, if that's.
But you do allow electronic transfers.
But they're all a 2-person
Yeah.
process.
Yes, I say it's
Yeah.
two-factor authentication. But that's what I mean.
Yeah, oh, yes.
A minor technical thing. Working parties tend not to be decision makers. That's why they're working parties. And we're about to delegate them investment market strategy decision-making authority. I'm just wondering about, I get the idea, but I also, as soon as I'd read it, I went, oh.
Yeah, interesting point. We're actually delegating so the council decides how much the funds are going to be.
Yeah.
And we're delegating where they go to the working party. But interesting point about working parties. I will defer totally here to the clerk.
As long as full council has approved that delegation, it is lawful. It's not usual practice. You don't usually delegate authority to working parties. But the nature of this one, because it is managing the investments, it would make sense to on this one. But no other working parties have delegated authority.
Yeah. Can I just clarify who would be the 3 members? That's probably the important part of that, you know, without being funny. If it's not the chair and the mayor, it should be, and I hate to use this term, the great and the good, but the good, the bad and the ugly would be probably just as easily appropriate.
Or just the ugly. Have the members of the investment working party been set?
That's what we're doing now.
That what we're doing now, right?
Volunteers.
So we have two decisions then, it seems to me. He said, I'm able to read it. So it's the terms of reference for we'll take the investment working party first. Any comments on the terms of reference or suggested terms of reference in red rather than the existing terms of reference in black? By virtue of the fact that this tends to be very fast moving in that we tend to get a quote from an institution, and there are not many institutions that will open accounts for town councils. The phrase I always use is we're neither good fish nor fowl nor good red herring. So that there is sometimes not a huge choice. So we have tended to roll over. The idea of the investments being split in 4, and it's essentially the 220,000 being split into 4 is to A, spread the risk, but B, say broadly speaking, 50,000 per institution on a revolving quarterly basis. It's got a bit out of filter, so we need to look at that. There are a couple coming up in this quarter, whereas originally it was on a quarterly basis. It was to make sure that we always had 50,000 coming in a particular quarter coming up. But this was set up 11 years ago, something around those lines. So it definitely is up for review of the whole investment strategy and recommendation then to full council. We're talking more here the day-to-day place the funds as they come due for renewal. Yeah.
Do town councils qualify part of the 85,000 government guarantee?
I would have thought so.
I think it's all customers.
I think that's more to do with the geographical location of the bank as opposed to who the customer is, as in if it's a UK-based institution,
Yeah.
it should be covered by FSCS. I believe that's a very general answer. There's bound to be caveats to that. That would be my understanding.
So that'd be one part of the governance, making sure that we are putting money under the FCS.
It must be FSCS.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And not breaching that 85,000.
Yeah.
Amount part of the protection we have.
That's right. Yes, we have, you'll see in the existing one, which was fairly prescriptive. We were looking at Fitch A rated banks only.
Yeah.
In fact, yeah, it must be 11 years because I set this up. So we were only looking at Fitch A rated banks. We then added Newbury Building Society into that on the basis that if Newbury Building Society was to have serious financial problems, then as a town council we probably have more financial problems than just 50,000 that happen to be with Newbury Building Society. Hasten to add Newbury Building Society are not in any kind of problem. So we added Newbury Building Society to that, but the whole thing is ripe for a
review. It's also from an LGA perspective, there is an interlanding between councils as well. And so I've actually seen the Treasury management strategy there, and they do referencing of other councils. So there is a list of ones they will lend to and ones which they won't lend to.
We have always fought shy of that.
Yeah.
As a small council.
Yeah.
Purely and simply because we ain't covered by the 85.
Yeah.
And therefore we've never got into that. That I think is a pretty, starting to look pretty specialist.
Yeah.
West Berks will undoubtedly have a team that can handle that. Thatcham Town Council, I ain't quite so sure.
And I agree with that. We won't want to touch that. So may I propose that the chair of this committee sits on this working group?
Well, shall I just ask for the terms of reference first? What we think about those before we get on to the memberships. Are we happy with terms of reference? Can I propose them from the chair if that's fine as a seconder? Sorry.
I want to go back to the ethics because the thing is, you can ask each bank for a statement and their environmental policy as well. And if we're trying to become more green and by 2030 or goodness knows whatever other date, I still would like those words, if possible, put into alongside best possible interest rates.
But could you not put that into the Treasury management plan? Because that would be the document.
Sorry, can I just clarify? What we are looking at now are the words in red. So best possible interest rates will not appear in the revised terms of reference.
So
terms of reference will
words in black are going to stay as they are.
Fluctuating investment markets, investment working party shall have.
Oh, I see you're replacing the black. I thought you were adding the red.
No.
Oh, okay, I take it all back, thank you.
Absolutely, that is something that we need to keep in mind when we are setting the Treasury management.
Sorry, I didn't understand that, thank you.
Apologies, I didn't make that clear. I think I saw a seconder for the proposal to change the terms of reference. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any other proposal or final questions? Okay, those in favour, please, of that change? Unanimous, thank you. Now we get on to membership. I would actually like to propose myself for membership of this committee or working party, sorry. Are there any other people who would like to put their name forward, Mr. Vice Chair? Vice Chair? Thank you. No, they don't have to be members of this committee, but I would suggest it would be sensible if we were to have members of this committee.
Can I make a comment that it has to be agile, as you said, so I think less is more for this.
Well, we have four members for the three.
Yeah.
So we need 4 members. We currently have two willing volunteers. Well,
Yeah. Can I just clarify one point before people might swing into throwing their hands into the air? Does this have to be met in situ? Can we virtue this? We have to physically turn up to the meeting.
we
have, so if you're not here and something happens, we can go Zoom, we have a meeting, we can vote, so it doesn't.
we have run by Zoom, we have run by email.
Yeah, I'm just making clear that.
We have one by WhatsApp.
Wow.
Ooh. Working parties, we have slightly flexibility than committees.
However, at West Berkshire Council, we were told specifically, Zoom people, was that just for full council? I was told for Zoom, you can take part, you can ask questions, you can have them answered, but you cannot vote.
Working parties are different.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's the working party nature of it.
So we have 2 willing volunteers. Are there any more volunteers before we have to put it to full council on next Monday? Okay, thank you. If there are no other.
You, Jay, did you?
Oh, Petra. Thank you.
That's the diversity.
Especially if we can get there by Zoom.
We have investment working party sorted. We now move on to community engagement working party. So the changes here are deletions, obviously is deleted, and additions in red, pending discussions of the quorum. So quorum of 3 of the elected members of 6. Anything to add to that, madam?
No, Chairman, thank you.
Now, we've already referred several times the Community Engagement Working Party. This meeting, currently, I believe, chaired by the Mayor. I think it would be, bearing in mind the contents of the Community Engagement Working Party, or the remit of the Working Party, I would suggest with the Mayor's approval that this may go on the full council for people who would wish to be on the Community Engagement Working Party rather than members of this committee solely.
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
In that case, would the terms of reference go as a recommendation from this committee to full council?
This committee could adopt the terms of reference and just refer the appointment of members to full council.
So we're looking to maximise the council's community engagement and raise the town council's profile rather than practices relating to all aspects of the council. So that seems to be a tightening up that would be welcome, but I'm welcome comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sort of raising the town council's profile is a good addition to that one. It would be good to increase the pool of members on that one. And we sometimes struggled with a forum last year and barely had more than 3 or 4 people on it, but it's an area where most people have something to contribute. I think it would be good to expand the reach of this one.
Well, we can do a recommendation on greater number of members if we wish.
Sorry, may I ask, did you co-opt outside people, not councillors, onto it?
We can do. I mean, we have made a decision with most of the working parties that non-councillors are welcome to join. Certainly the Heritage Working Party has a number, and I was thinking of inviting back a couple of the old members from last year who were councillors and no longer are to the community engagement one. But yes, certainly.
So why did you have trouble forming a quorum? Was it that councillors couldn't attend? Or that
It's usually councillors, yeah. It was, yeah, I think at that time they were all councillors, yeah, and it was just getting I think we probably only had four, for one reason or another, only had four named members of it, and certainly one of them spent large periods of time in America.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we did struggle a little bit, but we're suggesting at full council that we change the rules on quorums on working parties, and I think that will help a lot generally.
So I would propose these amendments from the chair, either for us or as a recommendation to full council. It seems sensible if full council are deciding on the membership, they also decide on the revised terms of reference. So I would propose these as a recommendation to full council, if that finds a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Those in favour, please. Thank you. And the composition of that will be decided at full council.
Chairman.
We're
Now 9
reaching
o'clock,
out.
so we need a majority to continue past 9 o'clock.
Okay. I would propose we continue past 9 o'clock, but would be more than happy if committee didn't feel they wished to. So I would.
Never going to volunteer.
I would provide, but
I'll second that one.
apologies, this piece has gone on quite a time, but I think we have covered a lot of ground just in terms of background
They're
information.
never going to volunteer to sub again.
It's all good stuff. If it was just waffle, I'd be I'd have a different view, but it wasn't. It's all good stuff. Can I propose from the chair that we continue the meeting if that finds a second? Anybody with counter proposals? Okay. Could I ask for those in favour of that proposal, please? Thank you. Okay. The rest of the meeting, well, who knows? Building conditions survey. This was deferred from previous council until after the election. I think my views on this, if I can impose them slightly, is that if you want to know where you're going, you've got to know where you are. And I think a conditions survey is something that I would certainly be recommending. So we find out where we are. Before I ask for contributions, if I can ask one clerk for a note of exactly what we're getting for our money, should we go down this route?
Thank you, Chairman. We did have one in the past, and it was a very welcome document. It breaks down capital and revenue expenditure. So it's very useful and will certainly help with forward planning budgets, which is something that is obviously very important.
I'm probably looking vaguely in the direction of some people who have knowledge of buildings here. So their views.
Yeah, I agree completely. If you don't know where you are, you don't know what you got, you don't know what you got to fix, you don't know when you got to fix it. I think I'm assuming that the quote is other people have quoted for it, but this is just the one that's come in at a reasonable price, or is that a contractor we have used before to give us this?
It is the contracts that we've used before, and they were their information was given to us by West Berkshire Council, so it's the same contract that they use.
And that's the case, and it's all pretty reasonable, and it's about time we did something.
Any Stephanie?
There's one point. Can we just note that in the list of places to be inspected, it includes the Broadway public conveniences, but as we are looking at item 10 to do things to it, I'd hate it to be inspected and then half of it pulled down or whatever, or altered. So let's not inspect at the wrong point of time.
I think under item 10, timescale is likely to be variable stroke extended on that. It certainly wouldn't be in the next 5 minutes. But point taken, but we'll get to item 10 and look at timescales. But good point taken. So I propose that from the chair. I've kind of take that as the vice chair, giving a seconder to that. Any other views before we take a vote? Okay, those in favour of authorising the expenditure, please. Thank you. We now get on to St Mary's boundary wall. At the risk of extending the meeting, Madam Clerk, could you give us just a little bit of background as to why this item is on the agenda, please, and the terrifying amount that we previously heard?
A while ago, it came to our attention that areas of the boundary wall which run along Churchgate are in need of maintenance. There's repointing needs something, but more significantly, the wall is leaning in places. The former services manager had the wall inspected, and a draft programme of works came forward in the region of £70,000 of work required to the wall. It didn't progress, and I've been back to that contractor, and they haven't come forward to refresh the proposal or anything. So this is using somebody more local that we have used previously. And we had similar issue with the wall within the grounds of the Priory, so they are very familiar with working on this property. So this will be to produce an initial appraisal and recommendations of what work that we will be expected to carry out going forward, and be breaking them down into urgency as well.
Then Tom.
Just a question. Is it the low level, 3 foot high wall that surrounds?
Yes.
What about the wall at the Priory, which is bent as a dog's hind leg in places, which is over 7 foot high? Is that part of it as well? That's a different issue.
There was an issue with that wall. Part of that wall actually does not form part of the Priory.
Yeah.
Part of that wall is actually owned by the sorry, I'm taking this because I was the chair of the Priory committee. Was owned by the houses.
You say there's a bracing.
There was I forget the amount, but it was into several tens of thousands. Well, the original quote for that, replacing that wall, was about 150,000 or something usually ridiculous. It's in the conservation area. The conservation officer at West Berks at the time was insisting the wall was taken down brick by brick. Each brick was cleaned, lime mortar used, rebuilt. So we ourselves actually were the people who sorry, that whatever they're called now, were actually the people who gave us the solution to that one, which was a far more cost-effective solution. Wasn't the prettiest.
The bracing bar,
but it's a bracing bar, still pillars in the ground of the Priory, and effectively bonded to the wall, so it was pulled back up straight-ish. And then bonded on, which was a solution that was far more cost effective than the previous one. But so in answer to your direct question, no, this is the boundary wall.
Can I ask a very basic question? I'm hoping you're going to say only the wall. How much of St Mary's Church is council responsibility? Only the wall, please.
Madam Clerk, it's not only the wall, but Madam Clerk.
Oh my goodness.
It's the churchyard. So the grounds does include, and it does specifically state in legislation, it includes boundary walls.
We did try.
We did try very hard.
What's the churchyard?
So the ground, the grass.
As it is a closed churchyard, it is the parish's responsibility. It becomes the parish's
So
responsibility.
who gets the money for people being buried there if we're responsible? for
It's a closed churchyard. There are
no more buried.
for 100 years or something.
Okay.
So we can't do nothing.
So yeah, under legislation, it is our responsibility.
So we have to cut the grass and everything else.
Yeah, no money from it.
But the good news is we don't have to replace the organ.
What the children ruin. Can I just briefly, I did actually walk around because I thought what you were talking about was a priory wall, because if anything needs a look at that does. I'm not a listed building person, but if there is any movement, it'll be because the ground is moving. And if they're going to lime mortar base it and drop it down and bring it up, you're bringing in all that flexibility, which might suggest that the construction has some sort of loose barrier between the two to allow the flexibility for the earth to move, because that's probably actually causing quite a lot of what it is, because you can see it's actually the dirt's right up against it, therefore it can only go one way.
Yeah.
Therefore, there is ways to do it without having to rebuild it in 20 years' time, is what I was looking for.
Certainly our experience from the people that we have the quote from was with the Priory wall that they did, say, came up with some innovative solutions to the issue. Again, we at the moment we don't know until we have a Pucker survey.
Yep.
So my recommendation would certainly be that we make the expenditure to find out what the condition is. If that proposal is going to second, thank you. Those in favour of that, please. Thank you. Right, we now come to recommendation from the Town Centre Committee on contribution towards changing places facility. I can't remember where this came to council and whether members of this committee actually know what a changing places facility is. Is there anybody who doesn't know what is meant by the changing places facility? Madam Clerk, could you please enlighten?
It's a facility that provides specialist equipment for those with disabilities, those of all ages with disabilities. So it will be hoists and like changing tables and those sorts of things.
Right. So very important. Yeah.
It's certainly something the Town Centre Committee was
Very keen on.
on.
Yeah.
Now, it won't have escaped your attention that it says there shortfall 45,000. It would not have escaped your attention that we have £21,000 in sell money we could use.
Yeah.
There is well, there's two aspects. Do we as a committee support the principle of and how about the funding? The principle of Town Centre Committee certainly were very firmly in favour of. The funding, we have a possibility, and I think it's a distinct possibility, that Greenham Trust may be willing to place money for this facility. Therefore, again, recommendation would be that we do not allocate an amount at this committee meeting. I would suggest we may want to support in principle, but that we see what can be achieved from third parties beforehand. Any other comments on that? That would certainly be my proposal then from the chair, if that's fine as a seconder. Thank you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Don't disclose your hand because you never know that they may come up with the
full whack.
The full whack.
Yeah, precisely. Those in favour then of that proposal, please. Yeah. Thatcham Library, this is merely an update, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Chairman. I've provided a background document that gives the history of the voluntary contributions over the years. The latest update, originally the proposal was to install an accessible toilet for public use, relocate the entrance, remove the canopy, build up the paved area and fit new emergency exit doors. For various reasons, the tender process failed last year, but it is out to tender at the moment with the closing date of Friday just gone. For a scaled down tender, which is to remove the canopy and to install the accessible toilet. So hopefully there should be a further update from West Berks fairly soon. It's just to note the update, Chairman.
I suggest we note, unless anyone has any particular views they wish to feed back to West Berkshire. No, I therefore
Glad it seems to be moving forward now.
Yeah. It's been a long time of coming.
Yeah, it has.
So I would propose that we merely note, if that's fine, just those in favour of that proposal, please. Thank you. Right, we now come on to some of the more pleasurable aspects, to me anyway, of this committee's work. We have the 17,000 that was mentioned earlier is for the larger grants, but several years ago we felt it important that we didn't lose sight of what this council actually was always quite good at, which was giving the amounts that were relatively small but made a huge difference to the organisations that we were giving them. Such that for several years we've not allocated the full 17,000 to the larger grants, and we have put money into what we've called the Community Project Fund, which again is in the earmarked reserves. It is for the small amounts under £250 to local charities and organisations providing a benefit to the community. And we have in front of us one from the Newbury Air Cadets. You see that there is a proportion of the Newbury Air Cadets who live in Thatcham. And which is a project I'm trying. I think I'm trying to read this one.
Well, that's quite a long proposal.
Yeah.
£210. Wow. Good governance.
For replacement navigational compasses.
By complete coincidence, I believe it's by complete coincidence anyway, I was invited to do 211 Air Cadets open day and prize giving last week, and was very impressed by the group of young people. I was allotted a guide to show me around all the activities that were going on. I was shown how to pilot the plane and use the radio equipment, how to use a rifle. I was putting a rifle in my hands is a dodgy undertaking in the best of time, but shown fairly basic equipment, but the level of enthusiasm that came across was very impressive. So I wasn't aware that this item was going to be on the agenda, but I would certainly support it, and I think probably the return on £210 worth of equipment will certainly be there. And,
we have a glowing recommendation from the mayor, Jay.
Don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't support it at all. But my question is, why are they coming to us if they are a Newbury outfit?
Well, it's a shared facility, and 35% of their membership
The minority.
reside in Thatcham.
They will have probably applied to Newbury Town as well for the grants and process, and they were, sorry.
No, carry on.
That's my experience on other authorities tend to say that they'll apportion a bit to one authority and to another, and there will be people
With exchange as well,
Yes.
so yeah.
Because there'll be children from all over the communities.
It's not that I don't.
No,
I'm just wondering why we were asked
yeah,
for the grant.
It's exactly the same thought process we have on the larger grants. When we are looking at an organisation that covers the entirety of the
yes,
basket.
exactly that.
And we've kind of always taken the view that we would be looking to around sort of 17 to 20% of contribution being made. This one could apply the same formula to this one. And committee may take the view that there are substantial numbers of Thatcham residents who will benefit from this, and we may as well take that view.
Can I say accommodation to Hosanne Edwards for filling out this application?
I know.
And the amount of time you top up the hours.
Yeah.
Volunteer of having to do all this stuff, they deserve the 210.
Exactly.
We have a recommendation from there. Are there? Does that find a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, and those in favour, please. Unanimous, thank you. Right, on to the final page. We now come to the items which are more procedural than anything else. Although the first one is most definitely not so. It's the proposed BACS payments. So 13.1 to be made from the, we've still got impressed account there. It's actually the current account, bank current account, rather than the impressed account. So we will go through that. These are, I see the clerk has checks for signing there. These are approved by the nearest committee so that we can actually expedite the payment to local businesses. They are approved by an individual committee, and R&A will have done some and others will have done some. The actual double checking of the invoice and whether there is a valid invoice is done at a different stage, which is done by two of the signatories to the bank account under with the checks for signing there, which is now predominantly BACS payments. But again, it is done by two councillors who are signatories to the bank accounts, having been prepared by the officers. You're looking quizzically.
I am looking very quizzically. So are we saying that if we meet 4 times a year, we only make payments 4 times?
No. Each comes to each individual committee. The next available committee, be it R&A, be it events, be it
They get their lot for the period.
We will come to creditors and debtors in a moment.
Yes.
Because we attempt to keep our creditors, attempt to keep our debtors as low as possible, obviously. But we attempt to keep our creditors as low as possible so that we can make payments as soon as we can. Because predominantly we're dealing with local
Absolutely.
Small businesses, and we want to support their cash flow.
Yep.
So what do we have what's the equivalent of DSO? So we've got a payment terms days outstanding. Do we have a number?
We'll come on to creditors and debtors in a minute.
No. You know where I'm coming from.
Well, yeah, precisely.
Yeah.
I know exactly, which is why we have the creditors and debtors list comes to us.
Yeah.
So these are all payments which have to formally be authorised by a committee, but the actual checking of the work that the officers do preparing the BACS payment is then made by two councillors who are signatories to the bank account. So I will go through these. There may obviously be queries and questions that the clerk will be able to answer, but if I can fire through these, the first page, which is actually page 3214. Are there any queries on that page? Sorry, Stephanie.
No, I only want to make a comment that we shouldn't have the falconry again. They're far too expensive compared to all the other lines of expenditure on fun. Way too expensive.
Noted, thank you.
Could have given them the bird.
Page 3215, moving swiftly along from councillor Nottingham's dreadful joke. Page 3215. And page 3216. And then page 3217. Page 3218. Three, two, 1, 9. And 3220.
Just out of interest, where's the climbing wall?
It was hired for the.
Okay.
Page 3221.
Okay. Sorry,
Yeah, no, carry on.
do we have an asbestos issue? We've got re-inspections. Do we have a potential risk there regarding buildings? We do.
We do, yes, we
Like-
have asbestos in most of our buildings.
Buildings, oh dear.
As long as we don't disturb it.
Okay.
That's the rule of thumb.
Okay.
Again, condition survey will undoubtedly tell us
Is
exactly.
it in this building? So I've got it next door then.
Probably.
To be fair, most buildings around of a certain age have got it,
Only if you move it.
usually in things like roofs.
More stuff in the room. So,
Page 3222.
Please,
Stephanie.
why do long service badges cost over £3,000? And who are they awarded to?
It's one of the right.
catch.
Is this contract?
You may have gathered this is a conversation that has been had.
Hundreds of times.
The long service awards were an innovation from last year's mayor. And they were for members of staff and councillors who had served in excess of 10 years on Thatcham Town Council. There was a minimum order for the badges, and they are badges, along with a small pen and a small printed certificate. And they were authorised by the previous council before 5th of May. And we probably now have sufficient badges to last this council and possibly the next council as well.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Nicely parried.
I was going to say nicely done, Chairman.
Well, will you be getting your badge?
Well, I just wonder, is previous service counted?
Yes, it is.
Soon.
Yes. So your holiday, which you've had.
Oh, this was this is the £5 that I mentioned previously. We were paying £1.25 per quarter to West Berkshire for annual rent for Pound Lane. And we're now paying £5 per annum to make it one entry rather than four. If there are no further questions on the payments, the BACS payments, pre-authorised payments made from the account. Again, we've got impressed account. It's not the impressed account, it's the current account. These are primarily direct debits. But they are also the payments actually physically made from BACS payments as well, that have been previously authorised. If there are no questions on a quick whip down of those. So I would propose that we receive and approve the BACS payments. Sorry, I should have done this a second ago. Receive and approve the proposed BACS payments, if that's fine. Second, please. Those in favour, thank you. And receive and note details of the pre-authorised payments, in other words, that have been done previously. These are split into three. We have pages 1 and 2 of 13.2 is the payments made from the current account, which is the previously authorised BACS payments and direct debits. Madam Clerk will tell you what the soldo prepayments debit card is.
That is basically our petty cash, but rather than it being physical cash, it's a prepayment card.
Okay.
Chairman, can I ask a very controversial question with Councillor Cottingham closing his ears? What on earth does West Berkshire Council do to deserve £976 rates per month for this town council building? Or is that a lot more than I'm thinking of? Because it's a huge amount compared to the other buildings.
It's based on rateable value.
Whereabouts is this in the document?
13.2.
It's on the
You're on the next
list of payments.
It's up on the board, look. So on the 3rd of April, we paid £971. And then go further down on the 2nd of May, we paid £976.
Are we actually saying that we would like to query the rateable value on this place?
Would we like to,
Query the rateable value on this.
please, Mr. Chairman?
Can I just
Yeah.
caution on that one?
Well, you think they're going to put it up?
Part of the issue that local authorities will have is when they ask the question, it doesn't just go down, it can sometimes go up. This is the point to make to members aware of.
Good point.
So, as you please, but I'm just saying. And it takes a long time for the rateable values system to kick in. It could be 18 months. As far as I was aware. But,
Comparing it to the other buildings there is what I'm particularly concerned about.
I think the footprint of this building is probably substantially more than Birdwood, certainly, possibly not more than construction.
I think, Chair, if I can just interrupt slightly there. If you look at the rateable value we're paying on the hall, if I frantically find it now, business rates on what we would say the rates are £770 for the Burwood Community Hall, yet on the opposite Frank Hutchins Hall, it's £6,000.
Yeah, there's a mistake with the Birdwood. Has to be.
So
Because you're saying Birdwood is £72 and you've got Frank Hutchins at £580. Makes sense at all, doesn't it?
and again, if you flick over to the other page, which will bring you into the Blue Coats, the Moors Workshop, your rates there are 5,300. So it's more a case of it might be easier or better for us to understand the question before we ask it.
Yeah.
Why don't Clark ask the clerk to have a look at the rates that we are paying and get the appropriate bills out and make sure that we are paying the right amounts.
I'm not, I just.
Before we start,
Here's running.
the exact word I was going to use.
Sorry, we don't want to stir up a hornet's nest. I can understand that. We'd like to know up-to-date information without laying ourselves open to huge increases. We do have a spy in the camp.
You got to talk about it as well.
No, you're.
Let's not forget the hat. We will ask the clerk to look at this matter. That is it. We'll move on.
Okay.
But thank
Right.
you for this, because it's actually triggered for me. I thought about, are we doing enough at WPC? Yeah. No, not just for, I'm not,
No,
no, I'm talking about.
no, I'm not looking daggers at Councillor Stevenson. So the sole payment card, yeah, please do.
The soldo payment card is the petty cash. Is that being used to pay rates rather than them being paid by direct debit because it's going to West Berkshire Council?
No, there's a different page 1 and 2 of the item 13.2 is the payments made from the current account. Page 3 of that, which is headed soldo prepayment card, that is the soldo prepayment cards. So that's the petty cash. There is quite a large item in there. Normally these would be relatively small, but 428 PA and sound equipment.
It was an online purchase. That was the PA that the events committee agreed to.
Right.
It's an online purchase.
So the majority of those are relatively small. And finally, under 13.2, we have the clerk's impressed account. Again, Madam Clerk, if you could possibly, because this leads on to another item, if you could possibly tell us what this account is used for.
The majority of the transactions from the clerk's account are reimbursing deposits. We take deposits for the hall bookings and also for allotments. So that's primarily what the account is for, and hence one of the items later on. We'll be seeking approval to do that again for the year ahead, because you don't want somebody who's hired the hall waiting. It's also if there are the emergency payment that needs to be made, I can authorize it through the clerk's account, but all payments would always be reported to committee.
So if there are no any questions, oh Lord, Bart who's in the talk. If there are no questions on the 3 elements to 13.2, if I could propose that we receive and note those, if that finds a seconder. Those in favour, please. Thank you. Now we come to the bank reconciliation, 13.3. So this is basically where we hold our various chunks of money. As you can see, majority is in the current account. We had some 30 years ago now, an exceptionally good bank manager at NatWest in Thatcham, who set up an automatic sweep to an interest-bearing account for anything over 100 quid or anything over 500 quid. Unfortunately, he moved on. The arrangement still exists. When we were receiving 0.1% on the reserve account, it hardly mattered. Now we're receiving 1.4%. It starts to become slightly more meaningful. So that essentially is where we hold the various bits of money. Are there any questions? He said, looking to Nottingham.
Yeah. So the cricket club's deposited money with us. What is that? No, I didn't know that. Oh,
Deposit on the pavilion.
okay. Part of the lease. And when does that?
15 years or something, they'll be up for review.
The review, so it's almost like an annual rent, 1 year's rent paid in advance. Okay. Didn't know that.
Stephanie?
It's just prompted me to remember that I'm in a singing group in the old Bluecoat School, part of the U3A. And years ago, I'm sure we paid a deposit to use it in case we damaged it, but certainly up at the Frank Hutchins Hall, I know we paid a deposit years ago when the U3A first started using it against any damages. If we stopped and left the Frank Hutchins, would we, the U3A, get that deposit back?
I don't think there is a deposit on there, or is there a deposit on there?
But they're held in a suspense, all deposits are held in a suspense account, so it will be listed.
Oh, they're in one of these accounts, the deposits.
Yeah, the funds are in one of these accounts, but we will have a separate suspense account on our Amiga package with them all listed as.
Any other queries on the reconciliation? I would therefore propose we receive a note of that one as a second. Those in favour, please. Thank you.
Can I ask this as
Please do.
part of formally that it's almost signed and witnessed? So you've got the reconciliation there, but just to make sure that you've got someone who's actually signed, you've done the reconciliation, then just witness it.
That comes as part of the checks for
Okay.
signing. So yes,
But that's a formal document to say that we've reconciled it, just making sure it has been reviewed and signed.
yes, it's reviewed as part of the check signing by the two councillors. Sign that. Aged creditor report. So this is the one that we attempt to keep as possible. You'll see that the largest item in the over 60 days column is actually West Berks rates. This is merely a bookkeeping entry because we pay those monthly. So that is the total bill that we will actually knock down. There's one substantial one in my outstandings, which is stage bus 1760, where we seem to have owed them money for a long time. Is that a?
That will be a deposit. It will be the whole invoice for which we would have paid a 50% deposit. And I would imagine that will be for festival, for Festoff in the High Street, right, for the mobile stage. And then the balance will be due at the time of the event.
Are there any questions on the aged creditor report? We try to keep that as low as possible, so it's actually good to see that the majority of those are up to 30 days, apart from the West Berks one. Are there any questions on that one? No, I don't think we need to note those. We review them. This next item you will see is on normal green paper. Therefore, it's a confidential item. If there are any queries on this, and this is the one where people, organisations owe us money, again, split into the various debtor periods. If there are any queries on this, please do not say the name. This is a public meeting and we are being recorded and people can watch. If there are any queries, can you use the account code, please, on the immediate left-hand side? You merely quote the account code and not the name of the person who owes us money or organisation owes us money. Yeah.
I feel I should be fair.
Indeed. Thank you. Noted. Are there any queries? Stephanie?
Line T177. You knew I was going to say that, but can you just explain that huge sum? Why is it owed to us? What for?
Yes.
it was a grant from West Berkshire Council. Because although we manage Turnfields, because it's a charity, it keeps its own account. So this is to transfer the grant that was paid to us to Turnfields. So it's a bookkeeping transaction.
And may I ask if, are we represented on that charitable board?
We are the charitable board.
We are the charity.
The council is the trustee. It is a corporate trustee. It is the sole corporate trustee.
So this is a paper thing. Yep.
But it's probably something that should have been resolved by now. I don't know whether the
Chairman, I believe it's because of signatories
Right.
on the Turnfields account. I will check with the finance
Yeah,
manager. though.
if you could, then after getting a signature to get transfer 18,000 quid, I'll take that in.
Confident.
I think, what I would say is that the debt collecting is pretty good. There's nothing much outstanding there. I think it's, yeah.
We have in the past had a small amount from things like funeral directors who've gone bust. We've had a couple of times, but majority of the time, as you say, debt collection is pretty good. Payments made from the imprest account. Approved by the town clerk and accounts for standing orders, etc., etc. So this is 13.6, which is the one Zurich Municipal.
But there was a period of time between the election and regular meetings happening that we needed to pay bills. Therefore, I approved them under delegated authority within standing orders. So it's now bringing them for retrospective approval. Retrospective noting.
Yeah,
because they've already
bear,
been paid.
bearing in mind again, these will have been signed off by two councillors already historically, and they will have had the relevant invoices in front of them. I would suggest that we merely note those payments, Tom.
Again, just for clarification, this is an annual date for renewal, 18/5. The date, is that an annual date for renewal?
On the insurance.
Presume
Yes, yes,
So
yeah.
therefore, we would have known it. Therefore, a large amount of money was approved. When we know it's going to be approved along the way, it seems to me that that's the sort of numbers that members should be.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that's the annual premium that is essentially, because we have a 3-year insurance policy. That's the annual premium that would have been approved by council a year and a half ago.
So I was just curious about why then does the clerk need to approve it? Does that have to come to committee? If we've already approved, we're going to do it.
Because for a time there were no signatories on the bank account because the council seems to exist for a short period.
So shall we change the start date of the policy so it meets up with our cycle, so we don't end up on the clerk having to just spend £8,500 because it's inconvenient on time cycle?
We could do. We then have to renew for a period of a couple of months and then renew for a period of 3 years. I take the point. It's a factor of once every 4 years.
Okay.
If you wish to put that as a proposal.
No, I'm just curious. I'm learning as the evening is progressing.
I don't say the insurance company would be open to changing the date which this paid, but that's
It's my
more
administrative.
Yeah,
it's small.
indeed. And we now come to, this is just a report, which is the debtors report for the legacy tableau project in the Frank Hutch Hall. This committee underwrote the expenditure, but last year's mayor is busy, I believe, with a book and attempting to rouse some more money for that. So this is merely to say that there is currently a shortfall of about what, £800.
Yes.
So that is merely noting. And we now come to, again, a formal thing to approve the annual list of suppliers paid by direct debits. So there are these various organisations which are paid by direct debit, which require approval of this council once every year. So I would propose that we approve. If that finds a seconder. Thank you. Any questions? Okay, those in favour, please. Thank you. And Madam Clerk, tell us about item 9.
So this is, as we've just mentioned, to give me the authority to approve these payments from the clerk's account, which are predominantly deposit refunds for the year ahead, so that we don't have to wait for those to come before committee before we can make the reimbursements and payments.
So again, more a bookkeeping procedural thing, which I would propose from the chair that we agree the continuation of the authority of the town clerk to do so, if that finds a seconder. Thank you. Any queries? Those in favour, please. Thank you. And lastly, but not leastly, we have to every year authorise the payment of salaries for the staff. Which, if we want the staff to turn in tomorrow morning, no pressure, but I would propose that we authorise payment of salaries for the coming year, if that finds a seconder. Thank you. Any queries, questions? Those in favour of that, please. Thank goodness for that. We've got a working staff tomorrow. Right, we now come to reports from town council appointees. Sorry. Ben is not here. Petra, anything on Home Start?
Yes, I have attended one of their meetings. They're waiting at the moment to hear back if they've been successful on a couple of grants. One thing that quite surprised me was 40% of the families that receive support reside in Thatcham, and I was quite surprised at a high amount of that.
Okay.
I will formally put something in writing and send it in.
We do have, as a town, have in a certain area in North Thatcham. We have one of the areas of highest deprivation in Berkshire, not just in West Berkshire. So semi-affluent Little Thatcham does have some severe pockets of deprivation. Owen and Ben not here. Thatcham Relief in Need and parochial charities. We continue to give amounts out to those in need, normally people who've fallen between the various gaps in the support systems that should be catching them. And quite a lot of what we do is new carpets, curtains for people moving into local housing association properties where they don't tend to be carpeted or curtained, and people cannot afford to do so. Around those. Welfare and Sport Society, Justin?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned curtains, actually, because that's the biggest single item of expenditure that the society tends to give out. So residents moving into housing association accommodation, as you suggested, Chair, there's not currently a joined up approach to the moving process. And it's quite a large amount of expenditure that people are having to find, obviously, when they move into a new property. In terms of my appointment to Thatcham Welfare and Sport, I met with the chairman on the 9th of June. I did actually submit a written report to the clerk prior to today. I won't read all of that. I've obviously touched on some of it just there in terms of the kind of funding that they will accept. The biggest issue that they've got actually is making people aware that they exist and what they do. So when I met with the chairman, a chap called Bob Champion. He mentioned, he went into a bit of the history of the society, how it was formed and where its funding comes from. To cut a long story short, the building that they owned many, many years ago, they sold and then they invested the funds from that using BlackRock. So that gives them a certain amount of return. There is quite a lot of money in their bank account, and in an ideal world, they would like to be giving out a lot more grants. But people aren't using that money either because they don't know that this society exists, or they might be in the wrong location. It is a Thatcham-based charity. As time has gone on, they've taken a more liberal approach to the geographical areas that they will support. So in recent months, they've helped people that live in the new estate over at the racecourse. There's some social housing over, where the housing development is. Technically, that comes under Green and Parish. It's in Newbury Town Council's area, but they've supported applications there. They've supported applications up in places like Coldash and Bucklebury as well. But they're quite small, but they could be bigger. They've got scope to be bigger, and they'd like to do more. But it's just a case of spreading the word.
Thank you very much. And volunteer centre?
Yeah, less to say about that, purely because I haven't had a chance to meet them. There was a meeting planned for the 15th of June that I'd been invited to, but it clashed with something else. I'm planning to catch up with them this Friday, Broadway House over in Newbury. So yeah, not really a lot to say, unfortunately, because I haven't had a chance to talk to them.
Thank you. Remains only for me to thank everyone for their patience for a very long meeting. If it's fairly normal full meeting in FGP where we go through the budget, where we go through the budget in the new council, is always about this time. However, I have to say the intelligent level of questioning, challenge, people saying they're daft questions and they aren't daft questions, has been pretty exceptional, which I think is going to augur well for the scrutiny of the town council finances over the next 4 years. So thank you, everybody. Meeting closed just before 10.